Nigeria has signed a United Nations pledge to end HIV/AIDS by 2030. Although the country is making progress in tackling the epidemic, several challenges persist. These include poor access to treatment and inadequate funding, as Phil Ehaza explains.
Prevalence of HIV is high.
Gloria Blessing and her team are trying to end HIV/AIDS in Nigeria. Diagnosed HIV positive 18 years ago, Gloria has struggled with her health, but since moving to Abuja, where she has easy access to antiretrovirals, she's doing much better.
I'm very much happy that I'm privileged to be in the city where I get my treatments, my ARV drugs free without paying anything, compared to the rural area where my colleagues or my friend is finding it difficult.
Although the government offers free ARV drugs countrywide, some hospitals in rural areas impose levies before patients can access the treatment, a practice that slowed Nigeria's progress in the fight against HIV/AIDS. The United Nations says more than half of West Africa's HIV-positive population lives in Nigeria. In 2016 alone, the country recorded 220,000 new infections and nearly 200,000 AIDS-related deaths. Activists maintain the government needs to increase the funds it allocates to HIV treatment.
Currently, we have 3.4 million Nigerians that are estimated to be living with HIV, and out of this population, only about 1.2 million Nigerians that are accessing the treatment. But government is contributing to less than 100,000 of those that are accessing the treatment. That shows clearly that HIV treatment in Nigeria is being funded mostly by donor partners, and that the issue of local content, local ownership of the response is not there.
However, the World Health Organization says over the past decade, Nigeria has gradually increased the funds it allocates to tackling the epidemic.
It is achievable. It's still, and I think if you look at the funding, it has been increasing. In other words, we are looking at the funding from PEPFAR as a major funder, the Global Fund, and then the government. So the government portion has actually been increasing, both state-specific funding that they are dedicating to HIV, as well as federal funding.
That said, the WHO estimates Nigeria still needs to double its current spending, which has reached $500 million so far this year.
Experts say the government needs to intensify its efforts in fighting HIV and AIDS by ensuring more people know their status and those living with HIV have better access to treatment. Phil Ehaza, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Tributes have been pouring in for George H.W. Bush. The late president's son, George W. Bush, who also rose to become US president, has paid tribute to the former president. Elsewhere in the world, British Prime Minister Theresa May said Bush's ethos of public service was an example to all. French President Emmanuel Macron called him a strong backer of the US-Europe alliance. And former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev described him as a true partner who worked together with him to end the Cold War. The current US President Donald Trump praised him for his commitment to faith, family and country. Well, let's now go back to our top story. The G20 is now underway in Buenos Aires, and let's get you the latest with CGTN's Stephen Gibbs. Stephen, at the end of the summit, the leaders hope to agree on a joint communique. How is that looking?
It's looking like they probably will agree something. It won't be the sort of 40-page communique that we once saw at G20s. It will be much shorter than that. But it does look like some sort of agreement has been made. That's what we're hearing from people close to it. What has been agreed? It seems one of the more sort of significant agreements in that document will be about the World Trade Organization reform. The World Trade Organization is an important important institution for global trade, of course, and almost every country in the world does think it should be reformed, and they appear to have agreed that. Now, how do they want it reformed? There are lots of sort of controversies around the World Trade Organization. one key one is, how do you decide what is a developing nation and what isn't? What is a developed nation? Developing nations have slightly different trading rules to developed ones, and China, for example, is categorized as a developing nation. So that has been a source of dispute amongst many countries for a long time, and it looks like they are at least agreeing that some sort of reform there is necessary. Also, we understand there will be some statement on climate change. Now, that's been a big controversy of the G20, particularly with the presence of President Trump, who is a sort of climate change skeptic. So it does seem there is a paragraph or two about climate change in that communique, but somewhat watered down. The same goes to migration, another sort of big political issue in the United States, an issue around the world. And it does seem that there is, again, a mention of migration, but not a particularly strong wording on that. So that's what they're hoping to sign off in the next few hours.
So WTO reform, climate change and migration. Let's talk about the most anticipated meeting at the end of the summit, and that's between President Xi Jinping and the US counterpart, his counterpart Donald Trump. Tell us more about that.
Yes, that's right. This meeting, which actually will be a dinner, will be after the G20 winds up in the evening in Buenos Aires. We haven't got many details on the actual logistics of that, including precisely where it will be, but an enormous amount of expectation about that, because if the dinner and the meeting goes badly, then that's a bad sign for world trade, and that will have significant effects, we understand, obviously on markets around the world on Monday. But if it goes well, then there will be a bit of a sigh of relief. Now, from the American side, the American negotiators, they're sort of giving the impression some sort of positive indications. This is partly to do with the way President Trump does business. He actually does believe that if you have a face-to-face meeting, a deal can be done. From the Chinese side, although they are very keen for progress, we're hearing some slightly more cautious sounds that this might be a step in the way of progress. What may happen is that the two agree that there is some sort of desire for progress, and then a furthermore sort of significant in some ways meeting between the negotiators in December, possibly in Washington, but an absolutely crucial meeting that happens, as I say, just after the G20 winds up.
As you say, a crucial meeting. Thank you very much for that update. That was CGTN Stephen Gibbs there for us in Buenos Aires. Moving on to other news now, to Zimbabwe, where an independent commission of inquiry into post-election violence that rocked the southern African nation has presented a summary of its findings to President Emmerson Mnangagwa. The commission is due to submit its final report soon. 6 people died after the army was called in to quell the violent protests on August the 1st. CGTN's Farai Mwakatuya has more on that.
Just 2 days after concluding public hearings, the Kgalema Motlanthe-chaired commission submitted what it's called an executive summary of its findings. Since October, it's been gathering testimony from survivors of the violence, eyewitnesses, senior police and army commanders, as well as leaders of political parties. It did not, however, call the president or the defense minister at the time, whose testimony observers thought would have been insightful in answering questions about the military deployment. Despite footage showing soldiers firing live ammunition, the army denies killing any demonstrators and says its response was proportionate to the threat posed. The opposition claims the inquiry was set up to blame it for inciting protesters. President Emmerson Mnangagwa promised to make public the findings of the 7-member commission, which was also tasked with coming up with recommendations on the action to be taken on its report. Farai Mwakatuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Let's head now to North Africa, where the US State Department has approved funding for the purchase of military equipment by Egypt. The process had earlier been put on hold after human rights concerns were raised in Egypt. Daniel Runches has this report.
The US State Department's approved 2 deals worth a combined $1.2 billion to be spent from funds allocated by the US Congress to purchase US military equipment for Egypt. The deal is subject to a statutory 30-day oversight period where the US Congress could disapprove and potentially block or hold the sale. Now, Human Rights Watch has told us that it's now actively lobbying key lawmakers to do just that. It includes an estimated $1 billion to buy 10 state-of-the-art Apache helicopters in a package deal which would include a whole range of equipment and services, including maintenance, inspections, night vision technology, for example. The US Defense Security Cooperation Agency says the intention is to help Egypt to counter terrorist activities emanating from the Sinai Peninsula that undermine regional stability. Now, Human Rights Watch Washington Director Sarah Margon says they are concerned, though, about the indiscriminate targeting of civilians and militants in that area, which she says amounts to, quote, collective punishment, which risks radicalizing the general population there. The US has also authorized 56,000 rounds of 2 forms of tank shells for the purpose of target practice, with an estimated cost of $201 million. Now, last year, then Secretary of State Rex Tillerson suspended arms sales to Egypt because of ongoing human rights concerns, following similar moves by the Obama administration. But the current Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has issued a national security waiver in August. Human Rights Watch says this sale sends a message of positive reinforcement of Egypt's human rights crackdown under the guise of anti-terrorism. Daniel Wrenches, CGTN, Washington.
Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including... Despite constant fear of another Al-Shabaab attack, a group of Somali women preach peace and reconciliation. And final preparations for Nelson Mandela centenary celebrations in South Africa.
Known as the Guru, Narendra Naval is one of Kenya's most successful entrepreneurs. The steel tycoon founded and built the Devki Group into East Africa's largest construction materials company. His passion towards business landed him amongst the top 50 richest men in Forbes Africa's 2015 list, but beyond owning a multi-million-dollar company, Narendra is one of Kenya's most devoted philanthropists. This week on Talk Africa, we sit down with the Guru and delve deeper into his inspirational story. Talk Africa, Saturday at 17:30 GMT, only on CGTN.
As Somalia continues to grapple with the threats posed by Al-Shabaab, women are calling for peace and an end to violent extremism. They've also called for full participation of women in peace-building processes. A meeting held recently in the capital, Mogadishu, brought together hundreds of women from different regions. Women have been caught up in the violent campaign being waged by the Al-Qaeda-linked group. Now they're pushing to be involved in rebuilding Somalia through participation in peace-building and reconstruction processes.
Women are really wanted to have a peace, and to have the reconciliation is very important. One of the things is always women, when it comes to the reconciliation, we're not in there. We might just talk, but we're never involved. And this is a new beginning for Somali women to really be part of the negotiation, to be part of the reconciliation, and to actually have a peace in Somalia. And that is very important to us.
There's much excitement ahead of the Global Citizen Mandela 100 concert being staged in Johannesburg on Sunday. Global Citizen is an international movement that calls on world leaders to end extreme poverty and reduce inequality by 2030, in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The concert features a star-studded lineup of local and international artists. CGTN's Julie Shear reports.
South Africans have wasted no time in taking up the challenge to become part of the global citizen movement. They've been hard at work in communities, holding leaders to account for the challenges faced by millions of people.
The response from South Africans has been absolutely overwhelming. It's the largest ever campaign we've ever initiated. Over 5 million actions have been taken by global citizens to earn tickets to the Global Citizen Festival. Because the thing that makes us unique is you can't buy a ticket, you have to earn it. your social action is your currency.
Global Citizen encourages change through active citizenry. It's partnered with the Motsepe Foundation to bring the movement to South Africa in celebration of Nelson Mandela's centenary. The late statesman believed ending poverty was an act of justice, a vision the foundation shares.
The foundation, since its inception, we have focused on poverty alleviation. We work a lot with communities from very poor rural areas. We focus on sustainable projects that will help these communities to become self-reliant.
It's only right to fulfill his unfinished business and bring the Global Citizen movement in full force to South Africa with the largest ever Global Citizen Festival we've ever produced, headlined by the greatest artists in the world: Beyonce, Jay-Z, Coldplay, Pearl Jam, Ed Sheeran, Pharrell Williams, Femi Kuti, together with Tiwa Savage, Casper Neuvest, the greatest artists from across the continent and around the world taking action in unison to see an end to extreme poverty.
South Africans will be rewarded for their good deeds on Sunday.
Doing good can be fun because people who are going to the stadium have earned their tickets to participate, to get to the stadium. So this is really exciting.
Everyone here is coming together and taking the action to work for the tickets and be involved in celebrating Madiba's 100 years. It also gives an important message at the same time. So you're getting to learn something and getting to be an activist at the same time, as well as engaging in such a special event.
Global citizens around the world have generated over 14 million actions in the last 6 years. It's prompted almost $40 billion in commitments to help tackle poverty in communities like these. South Africans will urge global leaders attending the concert to do the same. Julie Shara, CGTN, Tembisa Township, South Africa.
Well, we're going to break now, but we've got all the sport coming up, including Cameroon lose hosting rights to the Africa Cup of Nations in 2019. To a developing story now. The Confederation of African Football has stripped Cameroon of the hosting rights for the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations. The decision was arrived at during a CAF Executive Committee meeting in the Ghanaian capital, Accra. This is due to serious delays with its preparations and in the midst of a violent separatist rebellion near 2 of the planned venues. CAF President Ahmed Ahmed has announced that a new bidding process is to be opened. Countries have until the end of December to submit their bids. The tournament starts in June.
In light of all the reports which we have received and also having analysed the evolution of events, we have taken the decision to take the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations away from Cameroon. But against that, the CAF makes a commitment to support Cameroon, to give time to Cameroon so that it can prepare well for another Africa Cup of Nations in the future. Obviously, there are immediate consequences.
Still on football, Esperance de Tunis have held a training session ahead of their participation in the FIFA Club World Cup in the United Arab Emirates. The Tunisian club clinched a place at what will be their second Club World Cup after beating Egypt's Al Ahly 4-3 on aggregate in the two-legged CAF Champions League final. The three-time African champions will start their campaign at the quarter-final stage, facing the winner of a playoff between Al Ain of the UAE and New Zealand's Team Wellington. The victor will then advance to a semi-final with either Boca Juniors or River Plate. Esperance's previous Club World Cup campaign in 2011 saw them beaten 2-1 in the quarter-finals by Qatar's Al Sadd.
We are going to bring honor for Esperance, for Tunisia and Tunisians, Arab and African football. I hope we'll be lucky. We have all the determination to do our best. Our ambition is very high. We know we will be in front of big and strong teams, but we are strong too. We will have our say in this international competition. I think that Al Ain will be the winner of the playoff with Team Wellington and play the first match against us. Of course, there is a lot of pride when two Arab teams play together, and above all, when we know that we play in Al Ain city. It will be an extra incentive for us.
The president of the International Olympic Committee, Thomas Bach, says the IOC will make all efforts to include boxing at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. However, Bach was unable to confirm boxing as part of Tokyo 2020 due to an ongoing IOC inquiry with the International Boxing Association. AIBA, which elected Gafur Rakhmonov, an alleged heroin trafficker, as president last month. The IOC has launched an inquiry into the finance, governance and ethics of AIBA, which could result in the establishment of an Olympic boxing tournament outside of AIBA's control.
We want to have a boxing tournament in the Games in Tokyo, and we will make all efforts to have one.
I would like to believe what the IOC said is that they will do their best to eliminate those elements. All we can do is our utmost to be ready for the boxing program.
Well, that's it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Bye for now.